What's going on, guys? Still here, and today I want to take a look at Gaijin's 2024 roadmap from spring to summer. I was just watching Tim's Variety's take on it just a little bit there, but I'm a little crunched for time, so just want to get my own recording out of the way, because I do have my own opinions on it, some of which actually I agree with his as well, which is not surprising considering we were all kind of in the same social circle when it comes to discussing changes like this. But without further ado, I just want to say, first of all, on this list, Gaijin clearly said, let's see, where was it here? I think it was this first quote. The list contains only a part of all changes and new features that they're planning to add to the game. This list does not affect the addition of new types of weapons, vehicles, some mechanics and game modes, as well as graphic improvements. We're planning to present these improvements separately, where we'll talk about them when they're ready. Because a lot of people were saying, oh, no mention of RB, EC, or just Air EC in general, outside of Sim, of course. When people bring up RB, EC, or Air EC, they're talking about in RB. They're not talking about Sim. Sim is its own entirely separate thing. Sim, because of years of just different bullshit, whether it's bots and bombers and all that stuff, is basically a mode only for a certain amount of enthusiasts and isn't actually useful for really grinding anymore for the majority of people. Because unfortunately, utilizing the most efficient way to grind, which was just flying in a straight line and bombing in Sim, was ruined. So, and I've said it in plenty of videos by this point that RBEC would offer just a different way to play the game. I think it would separate the people who want a fast-paced dogfight pretty much only game mode, which is what AirRB has and will always be. There's no way Gaijin, no matter how much they try to change the mode, how much they try to increase the map size or change how the ground targets are spread out, doesn't matter. It's still, at its core, a team deathmatch. EC doesn't really rely on the entire enemy team dying because obviously there's respawns. As of course, if you've played Sim, you know this. Especially Sim has been changed over the years as well. Sim used to kind of be similar, but anyways. Yeah, it's basically the way that the game is structured, or the way that the game mode is structured. It's not necessarily a team deathmatch. Killing other players does contribute, but it's mainly about bombing convoys, bombing bases, defending those bases, attacking attacker waves or bomber waves, destroying spotter planes. There's different objectives. It still is a very bare bones game mode, but Gaijin does have a sandbox, and it's been shown in the community hundreds of times that they do have a recipe and a sandbox to improve upon that gameplay loop. Because, like I said, standard AirRB and Air Arcade and, well, technically normal Air Sim, but nobody really plays that. But standard AirRB is just a team deathmatch only mode. It's the same thing as arcade. Obviously, there's a little bit of a difference with you're taking off instead of air spawning, the flight models and stuff. But at its core, RB is basically a more realistic team deathmatch experience of arcade. But obviously, people don't want to play arcade because arcade is arcade, right? So they haven't mentioned that in this roadmap directly. A lot of people are saying, well, they're saying that they'll talk about it later. They just said a very vague, like, disclaimer statement, like, look, this isn't everything, but they also are giving a vague kind of defense, like, so anyone can't go after them, like, well, you didn't say this, 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 and this, and they're like, well, we'll talk about it later. That's how Gaijin operates. They leave it vague so they can, whenever they get face criticism, they just give a vague statement. So just prefacing this whole roadmap with that, just want to get that out of the way. I do hope they're planning on talking about EC. I really hope. I have a large suggestion, which I have a picture of, which I'll try and put up on screen. When I made it, it was before, like, the chaparral was added and a couple of other changes to the game and vehicles. But it was a suggestion. You can pause the video to read it, or I might be able to, like, link it somewhere if the video doesn't make it look good. But I had a whole entire suggestion for how Heli EC could be changed, how there could be split up brackets, different levels of threats depending on the bracket that you're playing in, etc., etc. So I really hope they did take a look at that suggestion, because it was a pretty well-received suggestion by at least other content creators at the time. I never did make a public video about it, I don't believe. But it was a very, very just well-thought-out explanation. Of course, there's some mistakes, and like I said, the game has changed a little bit, so maybe I'd have to tweak it. But at the very end of it, the gist was to improve the mode. And I really hope they do genuinely take a look at that because, like I said, War Thunder has so much potential to be different than what it's been doing for the past 10 years. They have the money. They have the player base. There's no separating the player base anymore. We don't want to fragment the player base because that was the old excuse back when RBEC, or it was called Historical Belligerence at one point, was being tested. It wasn't received well in air quotes because, well, there wasn't 200,000 average players, at peak time during the weekend or something like that. It was like maybe at most 60,000 during an update. We're talking really old War Thunder when it wasn't really as mainstream as kind of it is now. But anyways, let's just get into the roadmap. I'm going to kind of quickly go through a lot of these. I'm just going to give my opinions on them because, they're pretty general statements. The first one, for the first major update of 2024, this is all in progress. An aircraft fuel slider within existing constraints, meaning obviously you can't take 5 seconds of fuel, but you also you don't want to take, for example, the J-26 David, the Swedish A-36 Battle Pass aircraft reward. That thing has a minimum fuel load of 35 minutes, so the plane is an absolute brick. So if you're using it in ground RB, because that's a pretty good mode for it to be used in with a 3.7 lineup, you have so much more fuel than most of the other fighter aircraft and stuff that you're going to be fighting with. So you don't really turn as good, and you just kind of have worse performance. And it's like, well, I would rather take 15 minutes of fuel because I have a couple extra 100 gallons of fuel that I don't need. So, that's going to be something that's very important for bombers as well. Especially if we do get EC. Or even if you've played in naval EC currently, if you take a bomber or something, it takes forever to get to altitude because you're taking at minimum 2 hours worth of fuel, and you don't need 2 hours worth of fuel because it's going to take 25 minutes to get to your bombing target and 25 minutes to get back, or less obviously because you're not climbing, right? So there's things like that where fuel sliders will be needed. Fuel sliders are honestly one of the most important things for a game that was at its core originally an aircraft-only combat game. So the fact that we're getting it in 2024, it's a bit late, but you got to give credit where credit is due. They are working on it. Solving the issue with duplicated stock air-to-air missiles in the weapon selector. I wasn't really sure what they meant by this, and Tim was also kind of confused. He thinks it was something to do with, for example, on the F-16, you have 4 AIM-9Ls or AIM-9Js, whatever, let's say, because they do say stock air-to-air missiles here, so I think that's maybe the part he missed. But it does, it functions over, and you have 2 sets of AIM-9Ls, even though you have 4. So it takes, a solid second. It takes a solid second to actually switch over to the next set, and it kind of delays potential missile locks and kills. I think it has something to do with maybe just, there's some weird thing where it just duplicates the loadout. I have seen there's a weird thing that I don't like with the weapon selector, or flares. Sometimes it'll give you 2 flares back, or it'll give you a missile back even after you fire it. It's the weapon selector number is goofy, and it gets delayed by a second. So I don't really know what they mean by this specifically, but I'm assuming because they say stock air-to-air missiles, it has something to do with the first preset, and then it duplicates in the loadout section, which, it's not really a big deal from what I can see. Let's see. The improving the synchronization of object destruction on maps. What this means to me, what I believe they're talking about, is, for example, for years in War Thunder, there's been this weird problem, although I haven't seen it as much recently with smaller objects, but running a very light vehicle into a fence or some kind of wall that you can destroy, but it'll slow the vehicle down. And in the middle of that object being destroyed, it respawns because everybody in the match it's not synced on the server side. I think that's what they're talking about. There's definitely problems where on maps like Tunisia, you'll destroy a building and it will just not crumble. It kind of restructures itself a little bit, and it just kind of floats there. It's very weird. So it definitely has something to do with the destruction of some serious objects, because there are times I know I've ran into a tree and an Abrams, the tree starts falling over and then it respawns. And it's like, okay, that usually happens to me more often when the servers are taking a shit, but that's a big issue, and War Thunder's had that for a long time. Let's see. Minimap, enemy aircraft detection zones, new aircraft respawn points, and ground RB. This is honestly one of the most important things ever for in a while, because so for example, I was playing with my friend Doctor, which he does have a YouTube channel. I'll try to link it here or make it pop up on the top right of the video. We were playing 3-7 Japan, and every single game I spawned into my A6M Zero, which if you know the Zero, you don't turn against it. But for some reason, almost every single game we played for a couple of hours. In almost every single game, somebody was spawn camping the airpoint. They were just sitting in a fighter, not helping their team in any way, and they were just spawn camping. And they would dive on me, I would turn away, they would keep turning with me, and I would kill them. And I kept saying in chat to people, I'm like, stop turn fighting the Zero and stop spawn camping. Because, like, what are you doing? You're doing nothing for your team. Like, I'm in a Zero, I'm dropping bombs, I'm getting kills, I'm strafing AAA and stuff, and this guy is, like, just sitting by my airpoint waiting to kill, like, one bomber. I don't know why, but for some reason recently that's been a really big issue. At least at certain BRs. At top tier, I've had issues where I spawn in and all of a sudden I die by an R73 or an AIM-9M because somebody's just kind of being a cockroach. They're just kind of ratting around tree level by the airpoint. And as soon as somebody spawns in, they just use their HMD to fire a missile and you're dead instantly. So spawn camping the airpoints is definitely been a major issue, especially after the airpoints were pushed farther back. So you're farther away from the support of SamSite players that can maybe see somebody. Obviously, if they're flying treetop level, it's probably still nearly impossible. But it's definitely been a major issue, and it's really stupid when you spend so much time and effort, especially compared to some of your teammates in this game at this point, getting spawn points to get into CAS to help like your squad mates or, defend a cap or something, and the moment you spawn in, you're getting nailed by a R73 or an AIM-9M at top tier, or you're playing like 6-7, you get an up tier and somebody in like a Meteor or something is camping the airspawn. It's very stupid. So hopefully it behaves similar to Ground RB's ground spawn warning, where it's a constant like live feed of where that person is, at least on the minimap. If it's like Sim where the airfield flashes, so like the spawn point will flash when somebody's near the airfield in Sim, it's a good warning, but that system doesn't even work all the time. Because if you've played Sim, you know that sometimes your airfield is flashing and the guy who got shot down by the air defenses was dead like 3 minutes before and the airfield's still flashing even though there's nobody around. So it's not the most accurate system. So if it's a live update of like, hey, there's somebody just sitting around doing circles around your airspawn, I would prefer that system over just look, somebody might be near you, because it means you have to spawn in, try and find the threat. Obviously, especially at top tier, things like the Panzer exist and they can literally just spawn camp you with a missile. So I don't know. It's kind of it's one of the honestly the more major proposals or changes or something in this roadmap, which there's one later on I'll get to, which is a huge one. But yeah, that one's super important. They're adding new tutorials for active radar missiles. Obviously, we're probably going to get Fox 3s in the first update of the year. Laser guided anti-ship missiles, like the AS-30, because that is an anti-ship missile. Laser-guided bombs and ASMs with TV and IR seekers. So they're basically just adding tutorials for Mavericks, AS-30Ls, and all that jazz. Improving the replenishment mechanics and reducing the maximum replenish time for ground vehicles. This is kind of an important change, but I will agree with Tim here, because he said it in his video. Hopefully it like depends on like a case-by-case basis of the vehicle, because if you're in something like, say, like the Sidem Mistral. The Sidem takes forever for its missiles to reload. But if you shorten it too much, and I could just keep spamming missiles at air targets, it's a bit broken. There's certain artillery pieces in the game, or like rocket artilleries, like the Andrusha, which I have a video on. Go check that out if you haven't seen it already. Where you can just sit in a cap, and that has a reasonable reload time. But it is a pretty strong rocket artillery given the arc that it has, so if you make it like almost instantaneous and I can just sit in a spawn and it's almost like I'm cheating in terms of reload, I'm just constantly spamming out a weapon system, that'll be pretty broken. So we have yet to see how that works. For the interface, they're basically adding just more customization for the kill feed. You can enable and disable it. You can display people's nicknames, squadron names, and weapon types, which I don't know why you would, because in the kill feed there's already oh wait, no, I see the kill feed. Sorry, I was thinking the kill cam. Yeah, that does make sense. The kill feed's already got enough information in it. I don't see why. Because you can just press tab and look at the team score. That doesn't really make any sense, but whatever. They're trying to integrate the Steam friends list in the game client, which is probably going to cause issues. It's probably going to bug out. The friends list in War Thunder itself is still buggy as fuck and has been for years. Still limited to 100 friends, so it's kind of stupid. We have to see if that's going to break it or not. Wishlist functionality in the game, which is okay. I'm pretty sure you can't even buy people. Is it with PayPal? Yeah, I don't think you can use PayPal anymore for buying gifts, which is pretty weird. I don't know. We'll have to see how that works. Let's see. So for the second major update of 2024, obviously separating chaff and flares, that's a pretty important thing. The game has a lot of keybinds though, so we'll have yet to see how they'll do that. I would like to see the periodic display or dispense of flares and chaff work for both keybinds. So like say, for instance, let's say spacebar is my flare key and right alt is my chaff key, because with radar missiles, like you're probably going to be farther out. It's not as immediate of a reaction most of the time. So spacebar is just my normal flare button, and I have alt set to periodic chaff release as a separate keybind. So there's flare, periodic flare, or chaff, periodic chaff, because I can just press the alt key and do all the maneuvers I need to do to try and defeat a radar missile, and not necessarily like have to constantly sit there and press another key all the time, because I would prefer that key like chaff you really don't need to spam out, but I would prefer something like that to be automated. So hopefully they do have four separate keybinds for flare and chaff, and it's really just up to you of what you feel comfortable using. More customization is always a good thing. More player freedom and choice is always a good thing when it comes to stuff like keybinds. Separate battle ratings for different modes is the biggest thing that they're planning on doing for the second major update in the game. For ground attack aircraft especially, some of the biggest balancing issues, and not around specific vehicles per se, I mean technically it is a specific vehicle, but around lineups, is the ability for one nation to have vehicles that are so far superior in ground attack than another at a battle rating that they really shouldn't be at. I'm trying to think of an example off the top of my head that sounds reasonable to most people, but like for instance, the AMX International, or Ghibli, whatever it's called, the Italian ground attack plane, at 10.3, honestly, I would say it's a pretty comfortable spot for some of the threats, but in a down tier, the AMX is fucking busted in ground. In air, it's even more busted at 10.3 with AIM-9Ls. You're basically a more agile A10 and faster A10A early. So you're more of a fighter version of that. You get two AIM-9Ls just like the A10 Premium. You get a rotary cannon. Obviously, it's not a 30 mil, but like I'm saying, like if you really compare and contrast vehicles, like their battle ratings in air and ground are not really fair. Things like the A7 was another example that Tim used. It's the A7, like a 10.3 is fine. Things like the Strela, I still argue the Strela is kind of broken, but I was thinking of making a separate video for the Strela and another vehicle at some later date. But like I said, there's balancing issues because the threats that a plane faces in air RB versus the threats that it faces in ground RB are completely different. Like the DO 335B2, the premium, at 5.7 in air RB is a pretty fair battle rating. In ground RB, and especially a down tier, that thing is faster than most of the planes that people you'll be facing have. And you also have the ability to bomb tanks, strafe tanks very effectively in a very solid aircraft. Like, it's kind of busted for 5.7 in ground RB. That's a good example, I would say, for a ground RB aircraft, like in the prop tier. But this is honestly the biggest proposed change. Like, seriously, it's ridiculous. Like I said, so many balancing issues around lineups in this game are really centered around who can bring what cast into a lineup along with the vehicles that they have, and they can just absolutely slaughter an entire team. So it might honestly, funny enough, it might backfire on a lot of my lineups personally and a lot of other people's lineups. But overall, it's healthier for the game. Hopefully, Gaijin does it properly, because the more requirements you need to balance stuff out, the more Gaijins are really going to have to pay attention. I'm saying that with a slightly sarcastic attitude because, as we know, sometimes their battle rating changes and balancing just doesn't make any fucking sense. So, with that being said, glad it's finally coming to the game. It's probably honestly going to require Gaijin to really look at their BR system as a whole, and we really need a higher max BR in both ground and air, because compression will still be a problem. Anyways, a new air conquest mode in Air Arcade. Basically, just assuming it's just like air domination, but we'll see. We'll see how it works. Air Arcade, personally, it's fun, but the flight models are almost so over-tuned, especially when you get into the later jets now, that it's kind of stupid. It's kind of just, it's not really fun to me anymore. Air Arcade is just weird. It's not like a fun little game mode you can pop in and have fun. It's kind of like, okay, everybody's just flying around, just whipping their plane around in retarded looking barrel rolls. There's really nothing else to it. But we'll see what that does. The additional effects on crews when armor is penetrated, for example, fire in the fighting compartment, concussion of weapon operators when armor is penetrated, will be based on player voting results. See, that's an interesting one, because for years, like, the big old debate was the like when the Tiger got its armor changed, so it wasn't using the late war shitty made steel, it was using what it's supposed to be made with, and its armor effectiveness was changed. I feel like it would make more sense instead of crew really being affected, because that would mean something like the M103, which in real life was known for having more impact force than the Abrams when it came to, if you compare the numbers. The M103's AP round can hit a T-54 and liquidate the crew's eardrums behind it. So even if I don't penetrate a tank, I completely just destroy a guy's crew. Or even if I don't kill the crew, it requires me to... We need something like med kits. Because let's say, for example, I do shoot a T-54 with the M103's AP round. Because they do say here when the armor is penetrated, but that's stupid because it's possible for crew to be injured from a non-penetration, from the amount of force that certain rounds have, especially like with high explosive artillery, because we have direct fire artillery in the game now, a lot more of it. Again, let's say, for instance, I shoot a T-54 and I red his driver, and now he can barely drive away. Even if I don't kill him, that dude's probably like, man, I wish I could back up to this cap point and heal my driver, because there's a branch between realism and authenticity in game design, so it's kind of like, that's kind of a slippery slope, Gaijin. I'm not really sure about that. I would honestly prefer armor degradation over something like this, because I would rather your crew be fine, but you have to keep in mind that your armor is slowly being chipped away, so you have to maybe angle the tank more, hope they don't shoot the same spot or whatever. I would prefer armor degradation over something that can directly affect my ability to fight, which is my crew. Because at the end of the day, either you hit the ammo or you kill all the crew, and if you're just slowly dinging people, that means that basically it would turn the game into an HE meta, because they do say when the armor is penetrated, technically HE, because of overpressure, is penetrating, in air quotes, the tank. So I don't really like that, like I said. Bit of a slippery slope. Healing of the wounded crew, obviously, I was just saying, for this system, you need something like this system, so it's good that they're keeping that in mind. Updating the crew models by eras, that's an interesting little detail. But yeah, like, thing about the roadmap that I like is maybe not necessarily this all gets added when it's added, but it's the fact that Gaijin has put down on paper, hey, we have these ideas in mind. Instead of just everyone's like, so what is Gaijin going to do for the next update? And everyone's like, kind of like, well, I don't fucking know. And they have to leak things and things aren't true. I would rather Gaijin be like, hey, this is what we have on our mind. This is what we're planning to look into. And that's a good thing. That's showing that they are thinking of something or where their headspace is at or the direction of the game instead of everybody just being in the dark. This is something that me and a lot of people during the big little hubbub during the summer last year were trying to ask for. Like, just give us information on what you're doing with the game, because every update is just a surprise and it usually lets people down because shit doesn't work the way that it's intended to. And it's just very frustrating. It's normal for game developers to tell their consumers what they plan on doing, that it should be a normal thing in this industry. And unfortunately, Gaijin, for years, was not following that. Anyways, halfway through, this video is going to be long. I don't really care. I still got a couple hours here. For economy, the research bonuses for new nations, that was from the previous roadmap. Currently, like I said, me and my friend Doctor are grinding Japan, finally, and it's just awful. It's just such an awful tech tree to grind, and the fact that I have the top tier of America, nearly there with Germany, Russia, France, Italy, Sweden, and yet I have to grind Japan just like the rest of them. Like, I should have a really hefty research bonus for trying to grind Japan, because that tech tree fucking sucks. And I think that a research bonus would help tech trees like Japan be easier to grind through, because they have so many just gaps in their battle rating, or they don't really have vehicles that are of necessarily the quality to do a certain thing or to be able to perpetuate a match long enough. Sure, you can do really well. Like, I've done really well playing Japan, but after a while, it's kind of like, okay, I'm in an up tier against Tiger 2s, and the only thing I have to kill them is my M4A3 Sherman and my M36 Jackson. And my M36, if I start making myself known by killing Tiger 2s, they're just going to get in their DO 335 V2 and they're going to strafe me and kill me. So it's kind of like, okay, I don't have anything else to really contend against them with. I'm out of vehicles, right? So being able to just research through shitty lineups and BR spreads like that with a bonus would be such a help. For the interface, the ability to place a vehicle into a crew slot from the research tree by dragging and dropping, and the ability to change the order of crew slots. I really, really like that second part of it, because some of my lineups are like, I want my aircraft to be here in my slots. I want my tanks to be here. I want my AA to be here. It's like all of my lineups get kind of confused, especially when I first started War Thunder. I didn't really understand how the crew system worked. So like, I have the P80A on like 3 different crews because I used to play arcade more with it, and it's kind of like, oh shit, okay, so I wasted a lot of SL back in the day, right? So being able to change the order of crew slots and seeing, obviously when you drag and drop, I would hope that it shows you where, when you click and drag, it lights up the crew slots that you have it trained for. So that's a good change. The visual selector for secondary weapons with mouse control and quick access to wanted weapons. I don't know what they're talking about. That's kind of a weird word salad to me. Visual selector for secondary weapons. Visual with mouse. So like the multifunction menu. So like a weapon wheel. I want to say that's a weapon wheel. That's what I'm going to assume. That they're talking about a weapon wheel. Let's see. The addition of a timer to the aircraft heads-up display that counts down the time until the fired ammunition hits the target. Finally. That would be nice, especially for like Mavericks and stuff. Basically the system that helicopters have with their ATGMs. I hope they do that in third person and not just on the HUDs in the cockpit for like, sim and stuff. That actually brings me into something. War Thunder is in desperate need of a custom UI. For example, Arma 3, you can go in and you can customize where your HUD elements are placed, where like your ammo counter is and all that stuff, and your comms menu is. War Thunder really necessarily needs a very customizable UI interface, because Gaijin just doesn't do the UI well. In my opinion, their UI just sucks. So it built in to the game without doing any third-party fancy shit. Being able to customize your UI is very important for stuff like that. Social features, public squads and mechanics for searching for a squad based on interests of other players in the game. That's kind of a weird one. Sounds like almost like a server browser, but for squadding up with certain vehicles. So it sounds interesting. We'll just wait and see. Now, finally, the last but not least, the summer of 2024. Gaijin for their gameplay and game mechanics. New mechanics for saving aircraft at an exit zone for aircraft events and ground arcade battles, with random rewards and an instant Silver Lion reward in World War mode, which makes it sound like they're interested in World War mode. Like I said in the beginning of the video, they never directly mentioned EC. They were very vague. So to me, I honestly think that they are more interested in trying to fix World War mode again than EC, which is unfortunate. But yeah, that's a bit of a word salad. At an exit zone, I guess, I mean, there's already a timer in ground arcade. That's pretty short. That's stupid. Either way, moving on. Detailed damage model for helicopters. Gaijin, this should have been added in the game years ago. I just recently had a match with my friends where a guy in a K-50 quite literally failed at rocket rushing. We killed him. I killed him. And then he proceeded to kill me and 4 other people, got enough spawn points for the event SU-25, and mopped the floor with our entire team. You literally failed. You got killed before you got a singular kill, and the game didn't force J him out, and he killed 4 of us. It was like 4 or 5 of us. You got enough spawn points to get into one of the most loaded up cast planes in the game and destroyed my entire team with it. And then proceeded 5 minutes later, when he did eventually get shot down, I watched him literally drive across the map, instantly seek out me, kill me. As soon as he killed me, he turned his gun to face a Leopard that was 2 blocks over that he in no way could have seen. And there was no light tanks around the Leopard because I saw what the battle space was in the replay. There was nobody around him. He quite literally was using walls. Like, I, for a fact, was like, okay, this dude's cheating. Because, it was pretty sus that he already knew where everybody was with the SU-25BM, which doesn't even have a thermal camera. So it was already kind of sus that he was very, very effective at using laser-guided weaponry with a very, very limited scope. But, like I said, he literally failed upwards with a K-50, managed to get one of the most loaded-up cast planes at the battle rating, and destroyed our team with it. Was most likely cheating too, but again, doesn't matter. He was using a fucking helicopter. He failed at using the helicopter, and he was still rewarded for it. That is, in no other video game have I ever played have you been rewarded for failing so hard. So, just getting that out of the way. Honestly, that should be in the first major update of the year, not summer 2024, because it's fucking stupid, Gaijin. You've had things like the K-50 in the game for years with busted flight models. We had a bug where they wouldn't J them out for the longest time because it doesn't consider them destroyed, even though you got the kill credit for it. So please expedite the process on detailed damage models for helicopters because it's fucking stupid. Anyways, moving on. The ability to control projectile fuse settings in battle, setting the fuse for fragmentation, high explosive enabling, disabling radio fuses. Basically, this will buff the Puma. Because the AHEAD ammunition is supposed to be programmable. So we'll see how that works. That to me sounds like it's going to be, again, more of an HE meta, coupled with this effects on crews. If that does end up happening, sounds like the game's going to get some kind of stupid HE meta because it's a video game. It's not real life. The trick shots that we can pull off in a video game versus things that happen in a realistic setting, it's a bit different. So I don't really like the idea of that. Possibly leading to an HE meta, but either way, there are certain rounds in the game that do have this feature in real life, and it should be implemented in game. Reworked APHE shells, changing the fragmentation dispersion pattern, retaining the projectile's head on its trajectory. So basically, APHE is no longer a frag grenade in the tank, but instead a shotgun, which is how APHE is supposed to work. In my opinion, there's already weird instances where APHE just kind of doesn't fucking do anything in the first place, even though you just, say for instance, you just shot a Tiger II in the face with the T-29's APHE round and it doesn't kill more than 2 crew. Weird things happen sometimes, but we'll see what that leads to. Construction of replenishment zones and trenches on maps by vehicles with limited ammunition for their main gun. like the Su-51, which is a low-tier vehicle, and some ATGM carriers. Air defense systems will be based on player voting. That requires you reworking maps, and in my opinion, for top tier, there's a video I wanted to make at one point talking about it, but there needs to be much larger areas or maps for like air defense systems at top tier for something like that to be put into the map, because otherwise it's just going to be another spawn camped area. But we'll see how that works, because there is a map I remember in like War Thunder Live that I used to play with the homies when we got the Vidar, that update. It had that kind of concept where it was the biggest version of American Desert. There was replenishment zones and all that, but we'll save that for another day. It was pretty interesting. Interface, a new reticle for modern tanks and improving the display of tank systems in the gunner sight. That's awesome. I use custom sights on from War Thunder Live for the longest time now. All of my Abrams and pretty much all my NATO tanks with shared rounds use the exact same sight. It's basically the Abrams' sight from Battlefield. It's basically what it is. It's honestly way cleaner. All of the little hash marks for certain guns, especially like the T-80s and stuff, with basically near laser beam velocity. You can't even see your fucking target with them sometimes, so I would prefer something like that. Notification of when a reported player was banned without specifying their username. I don't know if that means directly to you or what in game, but that's interesting. That might lead to some pretty toxic spam reporting, but who knows. The ability to recycle inventory items that are not needed into random items. That sounds good on paper, but if Gaijin makes the drop rate for better wagers and orders and boosters really low or kind of scummy, then it's going to suck. Social features. Customization of the player card window, profile background. It's just some customization. That's awesome. Improving the destruction replay screen, showing the mini card of the player who destroyed you. Don't really know what that means, but whatever. Anyways, that's all of my thoughts pretty much on it in as quick a format as I could get. They kind of go into some more explanation stuff here. Kind of some of what they had in the roadmap, more explaining it. But yeah, no mention of Air or BEC yet, unfortunately. I would prefer they work on getting RBEC to be the mode that it should be, and also reworking Heli EC, because honestly air battles in this game is super stale for a lot of people. But that's enough of this video for now. If you guys enjoyed the video, I guess leave a like, subscribe if you haven't already. I'm going to link this in the description of the video so you guys can take your own look at it and get your own opinions. But anyways, thank you so much for watching. I'm Steel, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.